Now, we've already ascertained that you're a man of many talents, but what people may not know is you're also an ex-boxer, unbeaten ex-boxer, if my research is correct. Was that ever a career?
No, it was very low level what I did now. I've been a huge fan of, I would have, when I was a child, like I would have been staying up late at night watching Steve Collins, that era, so I've been a huge combat sports fan really from an early age, and I always wanted to do it, but I just never did it. I never got over the line, and I hit whatever it was, my mid-20s or that, and I started doing a bit of kickboxing training with a pal of mine, and the opportunity came, and they were going to run a charity boxing event, and I said, right, if I'm ever going to do it, I'll do it now. And like I love the training. I played team sports all my life, it's very different to individual sports, and I just wish I'd found it a bit earlier, because I really liked it, and went and had the first fight, and it was just an amazing feeling really. It went really well. I knocked the guy out after 30 seconds and it's just the most incredible feeling, like the whole build up to it, like psychologically it's a very challenging thing, because I think it's very natural in humans, I think, to avoid confrontation in the main, and the prospect of going into a ring and having a fist fight with another man in front of, there was hundreds and hundreds of people at that one. It can be quite you're after, you'd be finished up training and you'd be asking yourself, like, why am I doing this? Like, why would you do this? But you keep going and you go and do it, and then the payoff at the end is just like it was a feeling of kind of euphoria that is hard to beat, and kind of that went well. So I said I'd keep going, and I was at it about 2 years total, and probably the best thing that came out of it was I got involved in a 4-man one-night tournament at a weight at 72 kilos, which was a fair push for me. But again, it gave me actually a really good insight into the life of a jockey, because like I'm walking around now with like 86 or 88 kilos, and I had to get down to 72, and it was absolutely horrific. And that was, that's very low level really compared to what jockeys have to deal with. Walking around and you're worrying, everything you eat, you're thinking about it, and it's just psychologically it's tough. It gave me a bigger appreciation for what those lads do. But yeah, I went to that and won the 2 fights, and it was again just the feeling. It was like nothing I'd experienced before. So while there's nothing more tedious than listening to someone talk about their low level sporting exploits, it's it's something that really engaged me. Like I look back on it very fondly, and I'd love to have another go, to be honest, if I could lose about 3 stone.
So was it the weight that put paid to it in the end?
No, it's hard to give it the time, because it's one of those things. The last fight I had, I took it at like a couple of weeks' notice, and fought horribly. Was actually quite nervous before, which I hadn't been for the others, just because I knew I wasn't right. I knew I hadn't trained hard enough, and I knew I hadn't put enough into it. It's very similar to doing a gig on TV. Like if I go and put the graft in and do the prep, I'll walk on breezy without a nerve in the world. But there's only one time in my life I wasn't prepped going on TV. I got a call about 2 hours before it went on. They went live, they were stuck, and I went and I did the shift, and I was a bag of nerves because I knew I wasn't fully prepared. And it was the very same with the boxing. That one time I turned up and I didn't feel like I was fully prepared. I didn't perform, and I was a bag of nerves. So it's, there's an awful lot of parallels with what you go through kind of training and competing in boxing for life in general. And geez, it sounds like a mad concept, but I think the world would be a better place if every child had the opportunity to train in boxing in school as a kid. I think it would do so much for people. People think, you just have a load of kids fighting every day, but when you've done it and you understand it, and you go and you watch kids' classes, the kids' classes would have been on before our training sessions, and it's so good for children. The confidence levels and self-assurance, and just knowing that not to be afraid. It's a really beneficial thing, I think. I know it's counterintuitive really to say it, but I think it's a really beneficial thing for anyone to do.
Now, you're talking about the punditry, and you talk about not being afraid. I'm assuming that now you don't get nervous. You work for Sky and you work for ITV. Now, what is it about the punditry that you enjoy, and do you enjoy the limelight?
I like doing it because it's something I never thought I'd be able to do. I was shy, like very shy. I would never. If you put a camera in front of me when I was 18 or 19, I would have stuck my head down and had nothing to say, you know. So it was a very uncomfortable thing for me to do, and I you know, none of us like being uncomfortable, but I try to be as uncomfortable as often as I can, because you know that will bring you forward. And in terms of nerves, I don't get nervous anymore really. Again, once I kind of over prepare for these gigs, and once I'm going in with my notes in front of me, and knowing that I've done the prep, and knowing, right, no matter what happens here today, I'm not getting caught out for lack of prep, then I think it's very easy to just walk on and be yourself and do the job. But I wouldn't be one for trying to wing things now. That just, as well as not having the information that I need to give, I'm sure I'd just be a nervous wreck as well.
Now, you've mentioned that you're active on social media. Obviously, you need that to promote the stuff you do. Are you always prepared for the backlash if you tip up 6 losers and some hero comes on and wants to give you a bit of grief?
Yeah, look, I don't mind that sort of stuff. You know, I'll never get too upset about criticism. You know, as long as it's reasonable, I'll never get upset about criticism, because I don't know, I forget who said it, but I heard someone say there at one stage, you know, always pay attention to your critics, because, you know, they care. You know, if they didn't care, they wouldn't be bothered to give you criticism. So, you know, I try to take it on board, and, you know, and generally there's, you know, sometimes it's hard to hear criticism, but a lot of times there's truth in it. And I think you have to be self-aware enough to take it on board. But in terms of, you know, from the tipping side of things, I wouldn't really, you know, I think anyone that's aware of the mathematical realities of what we're doing, you know, there will be times where you can't tip a winner to save your life, and there will be times when you go on a hot streak. So, you know, I don't tend to stray too far from the middle line either way, because I know how quickly you can swing the other way.
I suppose after people have seen you knocked out another boxer in 30 seconds, you may get less abuse anyway. Right, moving on to, obviously you're from your native of Ireland, and you're involved with both codes in the UK and Irish racing. What would be the main difference between the two?
They're very different places to go racing, I find. At British race courses, there's more of an emphasis on it being a day out and a bit of a session, if you will. You know, geez, you go to some tracks there, and you know, the first race is hardly off and everyone's well on it. You know, that's fine. You know, if that's what people want to do, that's up to them. In Ireland, that's not so much the case. There are some exceptions, of course, but in general, it's a much more what would you call it? Kind of a laid-back atmosphere, maybe. You know, it's of course there's drinks being drank and everything else, but it's just not so much. The focus isn't all on the drinking, you know. And I think that's something that would strike people that go racing a lot in this country, in Britain, and come to Ireland. They'd notice quite a difference. In terms of other differences, like that, look, it's the same thing really in many ways, you know. I love coming racing over here. I'd like to get to see every track at some stage. I've done a good few at this stage, but yeah, they both have their strong points. You know, in Ireland there's less of an emphasis on enclosures, and you know the race goers can access pretty much everywhere, whereas over here, especially at the nicer tracks, there's a big emphasis on the enclosures, and you know that has good points and bad points. But again, I think there's no harm in different, and I think people that are used to going racing in Ireland would find positives coming racing in Britain, and vice versa. You know, I think I'd rather there be differences than it all be the same, that's for sure. So
what about the actual racing itself? The way, is it very similar, the way sort of trainers prepare their horses and the way that the jockeys ride that? So is it all, how similar is it?
I think so. Look, we've much less racing in Ireland, and generally bigger fields. You know, I suppose a criticism would be that the likes of Aidan would be quite dominant, and Willie and Gordon over jumps, but you know that is what it is. You know, it's ultimately a free market, and if someone is capable of rising to a very strong position, I'm not going to begrudge them or criticise them for that. I think in terms of British racing, I think there's too much of it. You know, way too much of it. Fields are small. Depth of quality isn't always there. I think it would be greatly beneficial to the sport in Britain if there was less racing. And I know that kind of flies in the face of the financial realities of the way the sport is funded and that, but if I had a magic wand and I could knock out 25% of the racing in Britain, I think in terms of a spectator and a betting medium, it would be enhanced for it.
Now, you talked about your breeding earlier. Now, we hear about some magnificent purchases from Irish Point to Points. Do you get involved? Do you go to Irish Point to Points looking out for talent to buy? Or
no, it wouldn't be my scene. I go very occasionally. I'll go to my local one most years. It's a scene that if you're going to do it, you need to do it properly. And I wouldn't really be one for kind of half doing things. So I'm happy to pop in for for my day or two a year and leave it to the experts after that. But it's the numbers stack up. You know, an awful lot of really nice horses come out of them. You know, the market is so strong for point-to-pointers that I think these days an awful lot of horses that in the past would have been starting off in bumpers on the racetrack are now starting off in point-to-points. So it's changed the dynamics of it a little bit. But you know, the market's very, very strong, but nothing lasts forever, you know. And I would just be worried that, you know, it's propped up by a number of big players, and you'd just be slightly concerned as an outsider looking in that, you know, if there was a series of big money busts, would say, that have come from the point-to-point field, that the whole thing could go into reverse quite quickly. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but these things tend to come in cycles. You know, people are buying from France when horses in France were reasonably priced. They bought the point-to-points when they were reasonably priced. Now point-to-pointers are getting more expensive, so maybe it'll flip onto something else next. You know, these things tend to go in cycles, but in terms of a nursery for future champions, you know, it's proven, the Irish point-to-point fields.